My friend, there comes a time in every person's life when they must make a sacred decision. Not a loud one, not a public one, but a quiet inner declaration that echoes louder than any shout. That decision is this: you will no longer be a puppet. You will no longer let your emotions be the strings that others pull. You will no longer allow your mind to be a playground for manipulators, deceivers, and those who thrive off your confusion. From this moment forward, you will begin the process of becoming unshakable, untouchable, immovable, and above all else, impossible to manipulate. You see, the world is not short of voices. Everyone wants your attention, your agreement, your approval, or your obedience. And these voices, they do not always come in the form of harsh commands. Often they arrive dressed as concern, as flattery or as urgency, but beneath the layers of tone, posture, and phrasing lies one core objective: control. And if you do not strengthen the fortress of your mind, if you do not become the master of your own emotional weather, they will find a way in. Mental toughness is not about becoming cold. It is not about turning yourself into a stone that feels nothing. No, that is not strength. That is fear disguised as strength. Real strength is the ability to feel, to care, to listen, and yet remain entirely in control of your next move. It is the power to pause when provoked, to question when others demand agreement, and to choose when others push. You do not need to yell to be strong. You do not need to win arguments to be powerful. You simply need to own your responses for it. The first step in becoming impossible to manipulate is awareness. Without awareness, you are already halfway under the influence. You must begin to see, you must start noticing the moments when your mood shifts and ask why. Did they flatter you? Did they guilt you? Did they shame you into saying yes when your soul screamed no? The manipulator's first tool is always hidden beneath the surface of words. They work through emotional triggers, and if you do not know your own triggers, they will be used against you every single time. So I ask you, what makes you say yes too quickly? What makes you defend yourself when no defense is necessary? What makes you question yourself in the presence of certain people? Those are not signs of weakness. They are signals. Signals that there is a part of you waiting to be healed, fortified, and turned into a source of strength. The manipulator does not create weakness. They only expose what has not yet been fortified, and it is your job to fortify it. Mentalness begins with knowing who you are and what you stand for. A person without self-definition is like a feather in the wind, beautiful perhaps, but easily swayed. The moment you define yourself not through someone else's lens, but through your own deliberate reflection, you begin to take back power. When you know what you believe, when you know your values, when you've clarified your boundaries, then when someone tries to twist you, their hands meet steel, not clay. You must also learn the sacred art of silence. Manipulators thrive on reactions. They live for your emotional spikes. They craft sentences not to share truth, but to evoke a surge from you. But when you give them stillness instead of fire, patience instead of protest, curiosity instead of compliance, you starve their strategy. Learn to be still. Learn to pause. Learn to watch people not only for what they say, but for what they are trying to do with what they say. And in that stillness, you become untouchable. And let us be clear. You were not born to be controlled. You were not born to please every voice in the room. You were not born to absorb the guilt, shame, or blame of others. You were born with the ability to think, to feel, and to decide. You are not a servant of persuasion. You are the architect of your mind. And once you claim that responsibility, no one, not a friend, not a stranger, not even a lover, can decide for you. Now is the time to train. Train your mind like a warrior prepares for battle, not out of fear, but out of devotion. Devotion to your dignity, devotion to your clarity, devotion to the truth that you cannot be bent by mere words or manipulated by emotional fog. Decide today that your emotions will belong to you. Your thoughts will belong to you. Your choices will be deliberate, and no one, not with charm, nor threat, nor tears, will take that from you. door. Because once your inner world becomes anchored, calm, and watchful, the external world cannot pull you from your center. And when that happens, my friend, you become impossible to manipulate. If you truly wish to become immune to manipulation, then let us dive deeper, not just into strategy, but into the very soul of self-mastery. You see, manipulation is not always an external act. More often than not, the first manipulator you must defeat is the voice within. The one that whispers self-doubt, the one that pleads for approval, the one that echoes every criticism you've ever heard and turns it into your internal belief. The greatest battle you will ever fight is not against other people, but against the invisible conditioning that has shaped your mind. You must learn to challenge your own thoughts. Not every thought that enters your mind is yours. Some are echoes. Some are implanted. Some are the residue of someone else's agenda, cloaked in your inner voice. And if you do not examine these thoughts, if you do not question their source and validity, you will follow them blindly. You will believe things about yourself that are not true. You will act in ways that do not reflect your highest self, and you will be led, not by wisdom, but by old programs that were never yours to begin with. This is why self-inquiry is essential. Ask yourself, who taught me to think this way? Who benefits from me believing this about myself? Who is served when I keep quiet? When I say yes out of fear? When I apologize for simply existing? These questions are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of awakening. For as long as you sleepwalk through your beliefs, others will write the script of your life. But once you awaken to your own inner authority, you become the author. The manipulator thrives in the fog of unawareness. Their power comes from your confusion. The less you understand your own motives, the easier it is for them to present theirs as yours. They will call their desires your responsibilities. They will turn their discomfort into your guilt. They will label your strength as aggression, your boundaries as selfishness, your clarity as arrogance. But none of that matters once you know the truth that you are allowed to hold your ground, the truth that you are allowed to walk away, the truth that your peace is not negotiable. Do not be afraid to disappoint. The manipulator counts on your fear of letting others down. They weaponize your kindness. They play upon your loyalty. They know you want to be understood, and they offer just enough validation to keep you compliant. But I say to you, your life is not a debt to be repaid with obedience. Your time is not a gift to be exploited. Your mind is not a mirror for someone else's insecurity. When you disappoint someone by being true to yourself, you are not doing harm, you are doing sacred work. It is also vital that you stop explaining yourself to those who twist your words. Manipulators do not want understanding, they want power. They will ask questions not to learn, but to find weak spots. They will pretend to misunderstand so that you spend your energy clarifying while they remain in control. But let me tell you this, your peace is worth more than their approval. Sometimes silence is the strongest boundary. Sometimes walking away is the loudest truth. And sometimes the greatest wisdom is knowing that not every invitation to conflict deserves your presence. Do not seek closure from those who benefit from your confusion. You do not need them to admit what they did. You do not need them to change. You only need to reclaim the part of you that gave them access in the first place. Forgiveness is not about saying they were right. It is about deciding you will no longer carry the weight of their choices. Closure is not something they give you. It is something you give yourself, the moment you realize that your worth was never in question. Build habits that fortify your clarity. Read deeply, reflect daily, breathe intentionally, surround yourself with people who value truth over control. The more you anchor yourself in truth, the harder it becomes for anyone to sway you with lies. The more you practice stillness, the more quickly you can recognize the noise of manipulation. This is not just a mental shift, it is a lifestyle, a way of walking through the world with eyes open, spirit calm, and heart unafraid. Remember this, you are not rude for protecting your energy. You are not mean for refusing to be controlled. You are not difficult for asking questions. You are not cold for saying no. You are simply awake. And when a person becomes awake, manipulators can no longer survive in their presence. They will call you changed. They will call you hardened. But the truth is, you are finally becoming whole. Wholeness is not soft. Wholeness has edges. Wholeness says, I will hear you, but I will not obey you blindly. Wholeness says, I love you, but I love myself enough to walk away if I must. Wholeness says, I am not here to play a part in your story. I am here to live mine fully. And when you reach this level of clarity, something remarkable happens. You become untouchable, not because you fight harder, but because you no longer play the game. So decide, my friend, decide today that you will walk the road of clarity, strength, and awareness. Decide that you will no longer be ruled by shame, by guilt, by urgency, or by manipulation masquerading as love. Decide that your mind will belong to you and only you. For in that decision lies your liberation and your legacy. Let us now talk about the subtle art of inner freedom, the freedom to feel deeply, to think clearly, and to act boldly without being bent by the force of manipulation. There is something deeply powerful about a mind that no longer trembles at disapproval, that no longer begs for validation, that no longer adjusts its truth to fit into someone else's comfort. That is not arrogance. That is alignment. That is maturity. That is power, refined and rooted in inner calm. The manipulator relies on urgency. They want you to move before you think, to agree before you question, to commit before you understand. They know that once you pause, once you breathe, once you ask, why am I feeling this way? The spell breaks. So they flood your senses with noise. They play on your fear of missing out, your desire to be liked, your instinct to avoid conflict. But you must understand that real strength is in the pause, that sacred pause between stimulus and response is where your freedom is forged. In that pause, you become aware. In that pause, you reclaim your agency. In that pause, you stop the cycle that has run unconsciously for years. You must train yourself to wait, to observe, to investigate. Ask yourself, what am I being pressured into? What fear is being activated? What story am I being sold? The manipulator does not want you to ask questions. They want obedience masked as cooperation. They want agreement masked as peace. But peace that requires you to betray yourself is not peace at all. It is control wearing perfume. To be truly impossible to manipulate, you must learn the power of emotional discipline. I do not mean repression. I do not mean becoming numb. I mean mastery. Feel everything, feel it all, but do not let those feelings drive your decisions until they are understood. Anger, sadness, guilt, even joy, none of these emotions are your enemy. They are messengers. But you must not build your life around a message you never opened, never questioned, never unpacked. Your emotions are sacred, but they are not always accurate. And when a manipulator plays your emotions like an instrument, it is your lack of reflection that hands them the music sheet. This is why solitude is your sanctuary. Time alone with your own thoughts is not a luxury, it is a necessity. In the noise of other people's opinions, you will never hear your own. In the pull of social pressure, you will forget what your own soul sounds like. Solitude allows you to reset, to recenter, to recall what matters to you. It reminds you that your value does not fluctuate with the applause or disapproval of others. It reminds you that your truth has always been within you, waiting patiently for your attention. When you become grounded in solitude, when you train your mind to think independently, manipulators lose their grip. They may try to provoke you, they may try to seduce you with compliments or guilt you with silence. But it will not work, because you are no longer playing the game. You have stopped reacting. You have started responding. And that small shift from reaction to response is the birthplace of invincibility. Do not be surprised when people push back. Not everyone will celebrate your clarity. Some will feel threatened by your strength. They will say, you've changed. They will say, you're so distant. But what they really mean is, you are no longer easy to control. Take this as a sign of progress. The more people who rely on your confusion, the more they will protest when you become clear. But let them protest, let them label, let them twist. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live in alignment with your values, even if it means standing alone. And if you do find yourself standing alone, remember this: solitude is not loneliness when it is chosen. It is sacred space. It is where you build the muscle of self-trust. And when you trust yourself, no one can talk you out of your truth. No one can pressure you into betrayal. No one can manipulate you into silence. You speak because your voice is yours. You walk because your path is yours. You live because your purpose is yours. You do not owe anyone your compliance. You owe yourself your truth. You owe yourself your peace. You owe yourself the dignity of never again shrinking to fit into someone else's agenda. When you truly grasp this, when you feel it in your bones, something changes. You no longer ask for permission. You no longer need constant reassurance. You are no longer moved by the tides of others' opinions. You have become your own company. And that, my friend, is when the manipulator loses all power. Because in the end, manipulation only works on the unexamined mind. It only thrives where there is doubt, where there is fear, where there is a hole in your sense of self. But once you fill those spaces with self-acknowledge, with unwavering standards, with deep self-respect, then manipulation has nowhere to land. It ricochets off your strength like a dull blade against steel. This is your training ground. Every moment of temptation to people please, every invitation to react emotionally, every guilt trip disguised as concern, these are not setbacks. They are tests. And with each test, you either reinforce your boundaries or allow someone else to redraw them. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose consistently, for your future strength depends on the courage you show in these quiet moments of decision. Something every unshakable person must develop within themselves. That anchor is principle. You see, the truly unmanipulable are not simply reactive creatures who push back against pressure. No, they are individuals guided by clear, steady principles. A person who lives by principle does not bend in chaos because they already know what to do, what to say, and what to reject before the storm even arrives. Their foundation is not made of sand. It is carved from bedrock. Manipulators thrive on uncertainty. They look for people who are still deciding what matters, who are still unsure what they deserve, who are open to suggestion, not because they are curious, but because they are lost. This is why your clarity of principle is your greatest defense. When you know what you stand for, when your values are written in your heart as clearly as a creed, then every attempt to steer you off course is immediately revealed as a distraction. Principle is your compass. When others try to become your guide, you must decide what principles will shape your life. Honesty, integrity, respect, sovereignty, peace. Choose your pillars wisely. Once they are chosen, do not trade them for comfort, for praise, or for belonging. The manipulator will offer you comfort in exchange for compliance. They will offer you praise in exchange for obedience. They will offer you belonging in exchange for silence. But each of these exchanges comes at the same cost: your soul. And you must never trade your soul, not for anything. You are not responsible for how others feel about your boundaries. You are responsible for holding them. You are not cruel for having limits. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not arrogant for refusing to be guilted into surrender. What you are is aware. And awareness, in a world full of unconscious behavior, is threatening. But that's not your burden to carry. It is not your job to make others comfortable with your clarity. It is your job to live aligned with your truth, no matter how others respond. Manipulation often comes wrapped in stories. Stories about who you are, stories about what you owe, stories about what will happen if you don't comply. And if you are not grounded in your own narrative, you will be trapped in someone else's. They will say, you're ungrateful when you resist control. They will say, you're cold when you enforce a boundary. They will say, you're difficult when you question their intentions. But remember, the truth does not require performance. You don't need to convince anyone. You just need to live it. Do not argue with manipulators. You don't need to explain your boundaries to those who benefit from breaking them. You don't need to defend your decisions to people who never respected your autonomy to begin with. Explanation is for mutual understanding, but where there is no respect, no trust, no intention to honor your truth, explanation becomes fuel for manipulation. Hold your line with silence, with calm, with confidence. Let your actions teach them what your words no longer need to say. Little toughness means being willing to walk away. From conversations that twist, from relationships that drain, from jobs that exploit, from friendships built on guilt. Walking away is not quitting. Walking away is choosing yourself. And sometimes choosing yourself is the most courageous act of all. It says, I will not stay in places where I must betray myself to belong. It says, I will not play roles I never auditioned for. It says, I will not carry burdens that are not mine. You must also learn how to detect manipulation quickly. Watch for patterns, not isolated moments. Do they constantly make you doubt yourself? Do they rewrite history to make themselves look innocent? Do they charm and then punish? Do they only show concern when you begin to pull away? Manipulators are not always loud. Some are soft-spoken. Some are kind on the surface. But the outcome is always the same: confusion, exhaustion, disempowerment. When your peace consistently declines in someone's presence, that is not love. That is control dressed in familiarity. The cost of being manipulable is high. It is paid in wasted time, in eroded confidence, in silenced intuition, in missed opportunities for real connection, and eventually in the quiet sorrow of a life that feels like it belongs to everyone but you. But that cost can be avoided. And the path is simple, though not easy. It requires brutal honesty with yourself. It requires daily self-check-ins. It requires strength to speak the uncomfortable truth, and patience to sit with the discomfort it brings. But let me promise you this: on the other side of that discomfort is freedom, real freedom, the kind that no longer trembles when others withdraw approval, the kind that no longer dances to the rhythm of guilt, the kind that no longer explains away its instincts. This freedom cannot be gifted to you. It must be claimed. You must look in the mirror and say, I will not be a follower of unclear voices. I will not be owned. From this moment forward, I want you to treat your peace like a kingdom. Guard it like a sacred flame. Know who gets access and who must remain outside. Just because someone has history with you doesn't mean they have a future in your inner circle. Just because someone calls it love doesn't mean it's not control. And just because someone appears confident doesn't mean they know what's best for you. You know what's best for you. You always have. And when you stop seeking confirmation from those who don't understand your mission, you begin to build a life that no one can hijack, a life not of manipulation, but of mastery. It is now time to speak of something even more powerful than resistance. It is discernment. Resistance pushes back, but discernment prevents you from even stepping into the trap. And in a world that often disguises pressure as passion, guilt as guidance, and manipulation as mentorship, discernment becomes your most prized weapon. A discerning mind is not fooled by polished words or urgent tones. It does not confuse charisma for character. It does not confuse flattery for friendship. It listens with its soul, not just its ears. How do you develop this discernment? You must observe the difference between words and patterns. Anyone can say they support you. Anyone can say they love you, but patterns do not lie. Watch how they act when you say no. Watch how they respond when you need time to think. Watch what happens when you succeed. Do they cheer or subtly compete? Manipulators are not always aware of their tactics. Some do it out of habit, out of wounds, out of fear. But that does not make it your responsibility to tolerate it. This discernment also means understanding when your own wounds are clouding your judgment. If you have been starved of affection, even crumbs will look like a feast. If you have been trained to earn love, even manipulation will look like a challenge worth winning. If your identity has been shaped by survival, then control may feel like comfort. But I tell you this, your history does not have to be your compass. You can rewire the instincts that lead you into change. You can re-educate your emotions. You can redefine what safe means. To do this, you must become deeply honest with yourself. No more pretending. No more justifying red flags because you're afraid to be alone. No more accepting half-truths because the whole truth scares you. No more mistaking chaos for passion or silence for peace. You must see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. Because until you do, the manipulator will always have an entry point. They will speak to the part of you that is still hoping someone else will save you. But no one is coming to save you, not because you are unworthy, but because you are already enough. You do not need saving. You need remembering. Remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Remember your instincts before they were drowned out by noise. Remember your worth before someone tried to sell you their version of value. Manipulators thrive when you forget your center, when you begin outsourcing your clarity, when you seek answers in their approval. But the moment you remember, the spell breaks, and what was once a cage becomes laughable in its transparency. I want you to understand this deeply. You are not difficult for having needs. You are not dramatic for having emotions. You are not broken for wanting space. And you are not responsible for fixing someone else's insecurity. Emotional manipulation often works because it shames you for being human. It paints your sensitivity as weakness. It paints your boundaries as betrayal. But sensitivity is not weakness. It is insight. Boundaries are not betrayal. They are declarations of self-respect. So let them call you what they will. Let them say you've changed. Let them say you're too much. You were never too much. You were just too aware for their comfort. You were just too centered to be spun. You were just too self-trusting to be redirected. And when you start honoring that inner wisdom, you become dangerous, not in the destructive sense, but in the sense that you can no longer be fooled. You become a threat to every lie, every false promise, every attempt to box you in. Now, let us speak of something else. Manipulative forces fear stillness. Most people are reactive. They speak without reflection. They agree without pause. They absorb without question. But stillness interrupts that cycle. When you pause before speaking, you see the game. When you listen without reacting, you hear the truth behind the words. When you take time to think, you reclaim your authority. Stillness is not inaction. It is power in waiting. It is strategy. It is self-trust. And it is rare. People will try to rush you. Decide now, they'll say. Don't overthink it, they'll whisper. But urgency is the language of the manipulator. It bypasses your wisdom. It hijacks your intuition. It makes you mistake pressure for purpose. So let this be your mantra. I will not be rushed. I will not be pushed. I will not be provoked into abandoning my center. My stillness is my sword. My pause is my shield. And remember, the goal is not to become cold. It is to become clear. A clear mind does not need to yell. It does not need to argue. It does not need to prove itself. It simply sees. And when you see, you choose. Not out of fear, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of alignment. And this, my friend, is the highest form of power, the kind of power that cannot be bought, borrowed, or broken. So let today be the day you claim this clarity. Let it be the day you decide that no voice outside of you is louder than the one within. Let it be the day you decide that your truth is not up for debate. Let it be the day you stop asking others to validate what your soul already knows. Because once you do, the manipulator disappears, not because they've changed, but because you have become unshakable. Now that your feet are firmly planted on the ground of clarity and your mind is awakening to discernment, it is time we talk about emotional sovereignty, the power not just to feel, but to own your feelings without giving anyone else the key. Manipulators do not only operate in the space of words and logic, they operate in the realm of feelings, for that is where the mind is most pliable. They aim to make you feel responsible for their emotion. They want your guilt, they want your pity, and sometimes they want your joy, but only if they can control when and how you feel it. Emotional sovereignty means that your emotions are yours and yours alone. Not a weapon someone can turn against you, not a currency someone can trade for control, not a lever to be pulled by those who see your empathy as a weakness. You must understand this. Your empathy is beautiful. It connects you to humanity. But without boundaries, empathy becomes a leash, and there are those who will yank it the moment you step outside their expectation. You must be firm enough within yourself to say, I care about how you feel, but I will not carry what is not mine. This is not cold. This is compassion with discipline. This is love without slavery. This is kindness with a backbone. The moment someone tries to blame you for their reaction to your truth, you are standing at the crossroads. If you cave, you train them. You teach them that guilt is the price you're willing to pay to avoid their discomfort. But if you stand your ground, you teach them that your peace is not for sale. And let me be clear, my friend, when you become emotionally sovereign, manipulative people will either evolve or exit. Some will try harder, turning up the emotional volume. They will sulk. They will go silent. They will use tears or tantrums. They will create scenes to make you question your truth. But hold your line. Stay calm. Do not match their chaos. Let your calm be the earthquake. Let your quiet be the storm. You don't fight manipulation with more emotion. You dissolve it with stillness. You must understand the difference between support and submission. A healthy relationship, whether in love, friendship, or work, allows for both people to have emotions and space to process them without control. But manipulation hides behind masks, concern, affection, even logic. And soon you are walking on eggshells, adjusting your tone, filtering your truth, sacrificing your joy to avoid another person's spiral. This is not connection. This is captivity dressed in sensitivity. You are not put on this earth to regulate the emotions of others. You are here to master your own. And that begins by recognizing the emotional hooks that have kept you bound. Perhaps someone made you feel responsible for their sadness when you chose differently. Perhaps they turned their affection on and off like a switch, depending on how well you served their narrative. Perhaps they praised you only when you were agreeable and punished you with distance when you were true. This is not love. This is conditioning. Emotional manipulation often thrives in close quarters, in long-standing bonds. It creeps in through history. It enters through shared memories. And that is why it is so difficult to name. But I tell you this, what is familiar is not always what is good. Just because you've known them for years does not mean they are entitled to your peace. Just because you share blood does not mean you owe them blind loyalty. Just because they were once kind does not mean you must tolerate their cruelty now. To become unmanipulable, you must be willing to update the contracts you've signed with others. Silent contracts, emotional contracts. Agreements made not with words but with actions. You must examine them and ask, is this still fair? Is this still loving? Is this still respectful? And if the answer is no, you must be willing to rewrite or revoke the contract, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. Not to punish them, but to protect yourself. And yes, it will feel strange at first, like wearing new clothes, like standing without crutches, like breathing air at a higher altitude. But over time, the air gets clearer. Your back gets straighter. Your thoughts become your own again. You begin to laugh, not because someone allowed you to, but because your spirit is no longer shackled. You begin to speak, not to defend, but to declare. You begin to love, not out of fear, but out of choice. That is what emotional sovereignty gives you, the ability to choose your feelings without fear of consequence. Because when your emotions are truly yours, you become impossible to steer. People can speak, but you choose what enters. People can weep, but you decide what to carry. People can rage, but you hold your stillness like a sacred flame. This is not cruelty. This is freedom. This is your soul finally exhaling after years of being pressed into shapes that were never meant for you. So from this day forward, repeat this to yourself. I will not abandon my truth to manage another person's discomfort. I will not shrink so that someone else can feel big. I will not be the emotional sponge for someone unwilling to face their own storm. My feelings are mine. My peace is sacred. My joy is not negotiable. And with those words, my friend, the chains begin to fall, not with a crash, but with a quiet dignity, because the truly powerful do not break free with noise. They rise in silence, they walk away with grace, and they never, ever return to the cage they once called love. My friend, now that we have explored the armor of awareness, discernment, and emotional sovereignty, we must talk about the one quality that transforms resistance into radiance: self-respect. You see, no one can consistently manipulate a person who knows their worth, not just someone who says they're worthy, but someone who lives it, breathes it, and guards it like treasure. Self-respect is not a feeling, it is a standard. It is not fleeting. It is forged through conscious choice, again and again. You must build your self-respect not on compliments, not on performance, not on popularity, but on principle. Compliments come and go. Performance rises and falls. Popularity shifts with the wind, but principle endures. When your self-respect is built on principle, manipulation fails, because your value does not fluctuate based on someone else's mood or reaction. You stop being available to people who only come alive when you're small. You stop tolerating conversations that insult your intelligence. You stop giving second chances to people who shattered the first with intent. Self-respect is what allows you to say, I won't explain myself to someone committed to misunderstanding me. It allows you to say, I am not here to win your approval. I am here to live my truth. It allows you to say no without guilt, yes without fear, and enough without apology. When you respect yourself, your presence changes. You walk differently, you speak differently, not louder, but with more gravity, with more grace. Because people can feel when you no longer need anything from them to validate your existence. Manipulators sense the absence of self-respect, like wolves smell blood. They test it not always through words, but through patterns. They see how far they can push before you say no. They watch if you flinch when they withhold affection. They note how much silence you'll tolerate before you break and chase. But when you stand your ground, calmly and consistently, their tactics fall flat. You starve their strategy. You become like a locked door to someone who only knows how to enter through cracks. But let us not romanticize this process. Building self-respect is not glamorous. It is not a highlight reel. It is built in lonely moments when you walk away from people who still want you. It is built in uncomfortable silences when you sit with your truth, even when no one claps for it. It is built in mornings when you rise with no validation, no approval, and still choose to live boldly, love deeply, and walk upright. Self-respect is the quietest revolution, but the most powerful. Let us also speak of standards, because self-respect without standards is like a house without walls, beautiful to admire, but easy to collapse. Your standards are the outward expression of your inner respect. Do not lower them to keep company. Do not mute them to avoid conflict. Do not suspend them because someone says you're being too much. You are not too much. You are finally being enough for yourself, and the world, the people, the opportunities that belong to you will align with your standards, not your silence. You must begin to see every violation of your standard not as an attack, but as a mirror. Not everyone who violates your boundary is malicious, but they are revealing something important. Where your lines are blurred, where your self-respect is still negotiable. Take note, learn, adjust, not to punish them, but to empower yourself. Every time you enforce a standard, you are not rejecting them, you are reinforcing you. This path is not without sacrifice. You may lose people, but you will not lose yourself. And what greater tragedy is there than living a life where you are surrounded by people, but estranged from your own soul? What good is approval if it costs you your alignment? What good is harmony if it is bought with your silence? That is not peace, it is performance. And performance is exhausting, but truth liberates. And in truth you will find a new kind of relationship. Not one built on control, but on respect. Not one fueled by manipulation, but by mutual growth. Not one where you are loved only for your compliance, but for your courage. These relationships may be fewer, but they will be real. They will not require you to bend, twist, shrink, or hide. They will meet you where you are and lift you where you are going. So I urge you, Raise your standards. Speak them. Live them. Enforce them. And when someone walks away because of them, let them go. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude. For they have shown you that they were only with you when you were willing to lower yourself. And you, my friend, are no longer in the business of shrinking. From this moment on, let your self-respect speak before you do. Let it shape your words, your choices, your silence, and your path. Let it be the filter through which all relationships must pass. Let it be the lighthouse that protects your peace and the sword that severs anything less. For when you truly respect yourself, you become untouchable, not because you fight harder, but because you refuse to settle for anything less than truth, love, and freedom. As we move deeper into this journey, we must now address one of the most crucial elements of becoming unmanipulable, the ability to think independently. A mind that is free from external persuasion, free from blind obedience, free from unconscious agreement, is a rare and powerful force. You must learn not only to protect your emotions and your energy, but to govern your thoughts with the same diligence. Because in truth, manipulation begins in the mind, long before it ever reaches your heart. Most people do not think, they react, they repeat, they recycle ideas that have been handed down without ever questioning their origin or value. But to be truly free, to be truly grounded in truth, you must begin to examine your beliefs. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Who taught me this? What experiences have reinforced this belief? And are they valid? This kind of self-examination is not easy, but it is essential, because a person who cannot question their thoughts becomes a slave to those who know how to feed them. You see, the manipulator does not always need control over your actions. If they can control your thoughts, your behavior will follow. And how do they do this? Through repetition, through fear, through urgency, through flattery, through the illusion of consensus. They create narratives that feel like truth because they are loud, because they are repeated, because everyone seems to believe them. But let me tell you something sacred. Consensus is not truth. Noise is not wisdom. And feeling right is not the same as being right. Independent thinking requires that you develop the courage to stand in the tension of not knowing. Most people trade truth for certainty. They would rather feel sure than be accurate. They would rather follow than question, because questioning is lonely. Questioning means you might outgrow people. You might outgrow systems. You might outgrow identities that once gave you comfort. But that is the price of freedom. And if you are not willing to think for yourself, someone else will do the thinking for you, and they will not always have your best interest in mind. This is why solitude once again becomes essential. In solitude, your thoughts are finally audible. You hear the whispers that get drowned in the noise of other people's opinions. You hear the voice that says, "This doesn't sit right," even when the crowd says, "This is truth." The manipulator hates solitude because it is in solitude that their illusion begins to crack. Their words lose power, their presence fades, their spell breaks, because you are no longer leaning on them for certainty. You are leaning into your own understanding. You must also begin to develop intellectual humility. That means being able to say, "I don't know." It means being open to new evidence. It means being willing to change your mind when truth demands it, not when pressure demands it. A person who is mentally rigid is just as easy to manipulate as one who is mentally absent. Why? Because they are predictable. They will reject anything that challenges their identity, and predictability is the manipulator's playground. But a person who is curious, who is open but grounded, who listens without absorbing, who reflects before concluding, that person is dangerous to deception. That person cannot be molded by slogans or bent by emotional triggers. That person hears the words, but listens for the motive. That person asks not, "Is this pleasing?" but "Is this true?" And that level of discernment creates mental immunity, an inner firewall against false narrative. You must make it a daily practice to examine the ideas you carry. Are they inherited or chosen? Are they life-giving or limiting? Are they rooted in fear or in clarity? Because if you are thinking with someone else's thoughts, you are living someone else's life. and no manipulator can survive in the presence of a person who has reclaimed the sovereignty of their own mind. Independent thinking also means being able to detach your identity from your ideas. This is hard. Most people are their beliefs, so when you question them, they feel attacked. But the wise know that ideas are tools, not cages. They know that beliefs are meant to evolve, not calcify. They know that holding an idea is not the same as being held by it. When you can say, "This is what I believe today, and I remain open to refining it," you are no longer easily manipulated because you are not afraid of change. You are not controlled by ego. You are committed only to truth. And that is the final test. Are you committed to truth, or are you committed to being right? Because the manipulator thrives on your desire to appear certain. They thrive on your fear of being seen as foolish. They thrive on your need to be affirmed. But when you say, "I don't need to be right, I need to be real," the game ends. You step off the chessboard and become the player, not the pawn. So, my friend, build your mind like a fortress, but keep its gates open to wisdom. Strengthen your logic, clarify your values, question your stories, study your triggers, and most of all, honor your curiosity. For the person who thinks independently is not only unshakable, they are a light in a world full of shadows. They do not need to control others, and they cannot be controlled. They are free. And that is the most powerful form of resistance you can ever embody. Let us turn our attention toward the final fortress that keeps the manipulator at bay: emotional detachment from outcome. If you are still controlled by how things turn out, by how people respond, by whether or not your truth is received, by whether others stay or leave, then you are still within reach of manipulation. The key to liberation is not in controlling outcomes, but in mastering your response to them. Manipulators rely on your fear of loss, loss of love, loss of opportunity, loss of reputation, loss of belonging. They weaponize your desire for certainty, for comfort, for closure. They promise relief if only you comply. But here is the truth they never want you to see. You can survive the loss. You can survive discomfort. You can walk through rejection and still come out whole, because your peace is not a product of circumstance. It is a result of alignment. Emotional detachment is not apathy. It is not a cold indifference to life. It is not about not caring. On the contrary, it is the highest form of caring, because it cares without clinging. It loves without begging. It acts with intention, not desperation. It says, "I choose this path because it's right, not because it guarantees reward." When you can act from that place, the manipulator loses their leverage. Their approval is no longer your oxygen. Their validation is no longer your anchor. You are free. You must begin to examine every place in your life where you are attached to how others perceive you. Are you still trying to be liked by everyone? Are you still afraid of being misunderstood? Are you still seeking applause from people who would rather you stay small? These attachments are not harmless. They are open doors. They allow the manipulator to enter and say, "Do this, so I'll stay." Or worse, "Be this, so you'll be worthy." But the moment you no longer need them to stay, you become unshakable. Practice saying this: "I can care without attachment." Let it echo through your actions. Let it guide your silence. Let it be the strength behind your boundaries. Because when your soul is no longer sold to outcomes, you are finally home. You speak your truth, not to provoke, not to impress, not even to persuade, but because it is the truth. And that, my friend, is the mark of a free soul. Let me tell you something else that will protect your mind forever: the courage to walk away without explanation. Manipulators are masters of drawing you back in with the illusion of unfinished business. They will say, "You owe me closure." They will say, "Let's talk about it one more time." But what they are really asking is, "Can I have one more chance to bend your mind?" The strong do not return to cages out of politeness. The clear do not revisit chaos to look kind. The awakened walk away without drama, without apology, and without hesitation. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. You are not cold, you are clean. Clean from confusion, clean from games, clean from the addictive cycle of approval and guilt. You have realized that not every conversation leads to peace, that not every person deserves your final word, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Detachment also means refusing to be pulled into the emotional states of others. The manipulator often creates urgency by escalating their emotions. They act angry, panicked, distraught, not always because they feel it, but because they know you'll respond to it. And if your peace is not protected, you will absorb their energy as your own. You will mirror their chaos and lose yourself in their storm. But when you are anchored in your own calm, you no longer react to their temperature. You set your own. This is what maturity looks like, not rising to every provocation, not chasing every insult with a defense, not offering your energy to every spark. Sometimes strength is letting the fire burn out on its own. You do not always need to correct. You do not always need to explain. You do not always need to win. You simply need to know and act from that knowing with quiet conviction. And let me say this too. Detachment allows space for the right people to come. The more you cling to those who do not value you, the more you repel the ones who would. When you release what was never aligned, when you stop trying to fix what was meant to fall apart, you create room for peace, room for authentic connection, room for a life not built on manipulation, but on mutual respect and clarity. And yes, at times it will feel empty, but that emptiness is not loneliness, it is healing. It is recalibration. It is your soul saying, thank you for not filling me with what doesn't belong. Let that emptiness breathe. Let it teach you. Let it remind you that you are already whole, already worthy, already home within yourself. Because once you've mastered detachment from outcome, you are no longer on a leash. You can walk away. You can let go. You can lose what was false and never look back. And that, my friend, is the highest form of self-protection, not a wall built from fear, but a soul lit by inner freedom. We have walked a long path together, through the valleys of self-reflection, across the plains of principle, up the mountain of mental strength, and now we stand here at the summit. This is the final piece, the final truth, and it is this: to become truly impossible to manipulate, you must fall deeply in love with your own life. Because the person who is fulfilled, who is whole, who wakes each morning with purpose and goes to bed with peace, that person is immune to seduction. They are not vulnerable to shiny offers that promise happiness, for they already live in joy. They are not desperate for someone to rescue them, for they have become their own anchor. They do not bend for crumbs of attention, for they dine daily at the banquet of self-respect. Manipulators find no grip in someone who is full from within. So let me ask you now, what lights you up when no one is watching? What do you want your life to look like? Not your relationships, not your reputation, but your life. Because when you fall in love with your life, when you choose to build it brick by brick with intention and vision, every attempt to hijack your path becomes obvious. You are no longer available for detours disguised as dreams. You are no longer seduced by drama dressed as destiny. Fall in love with your peace. Protect it. Prioritize it. Build your mornings around it. Build your relationships around it. Build your work around it. Peace is not a product of everything going right. It is the result of alignment. The more aligned you are with your truth, the more peace becomes your natural state. And the more peace you carry, the less manipulation can touch you. Chaos cannot live where stillness resides. Fall in love with your solitude, not because you are avoiding others, but because you are no longer afraid of yourself. In solitude, you sharpen your voice, you deepen your roots, you learn to move without applause. And once you can enjoy your own company, you become selective, not from arrogance, but from discernment. You no longer let people in just because they're loud, persistent, or familiar. You let them in because they honor the life you are building, not because they demand a piece of it. Fall in love with your voice. Use it, not to dominate, but to declare. Speak not to impress, but to express. Say what is true for you, even when it trembles. Say it when it's uncomfortable. Say it when it's costly. Say it not because someone needs to hear it, but because you need to honor it. Because every time you silence your truth to please someone else, a piece of you disappears. And every time you speak it with courage, a piece of you returns. Fall in love with your standards. Let them filter your choices. Let them guide your days. You are not picky, you are precise. You are not rigid, you are rooted. You are not difficult, you are discerning. And the people who cannot rise to meet your standards are not bad. They are simply not meant to shape your future. Do not lower the bar so someone else can reach it. Rise to your own, and let others rise if they choose. Fall in love with your journey. It will not always make sense. It will not always be celebrated. It will not always be clear. But if you walk it with courage, if you take one honest step after another, if you keep showing up with integrity, then you will create a life that no manipulator can enter. Not because you are protected by walls, but because you are guided by truth. And finally, fall in love with your freedom, your mental freedom, your emotional freedom, your spiritual freedom, the kind of freedom that says, I choose, I decide, I create. I leave when it's time. I stay when it's real. I speak when it matters. I listen when it's wise. This freedom is not given, it is claimed. Not by fighting others, but by refusing to betray yourself. Because in the end, becoming impossible to manipulate is not about controlling the world. It's about mastering your inner world. It's about knowing who you are, honoring what you value, enforcing what you deserve, and protecting what you've built. It's about walking through life so full of purpose, clarity, and self-trust that nothing can twist your path or steal your peace. You are no longer a candidate for manipulation, not because you resist it with force, but because you radiate clarity. Not because you fear people, but because you know yourself. Not because you shut down emotionally, but because you feel everything and still choose truth. This is your power. This is your gift. This is your path. Walk it now with your head high, your heart open, and your spirit free.